In the Phantom Menace, we saw a moment that changed the galaxy. Qui-Gon Jinn was struck down by Darth Maul, and with his dying breath, he asked Obi-Wan to train the boy he believed was the chosen one, Anakin Skywalker. Obi-Wan agreed, and the Council let him keep it. That choice shaped everything that followed, because over the next 13 years, Anakin's fear grew, his anger deepened, and eventually, it consumed him. But what if Yoda had stepped in? What if the Grand Master of the Jedi Order saw what Obi-Wan didn't? What if he trained Anakin from the start? In this version of the story, that's exactly what happens, and nothing unfolds the same. Let's begin. Qui-Gon dies at the hands of Darth Maul. Obi-Wan kneels before the Council, pleading to take the boy as his Padawan. He reminds them it was his master's dying wish. He says he owes it to him and to the Force. But this time, Yoda doesn't simply frown and allow it. He sees what's coming. He knows this boy is powerful and dangerous and different. He knows that rushing his training could ruin everything. So Yoda stands, and he tells Obi-Wan that he will honor Qui-Gon's wish, but not by giving the boy to a fresh knight. No, he will train the boy himself. And just like that, the future begins to shift. The Order has never seen anything like it. Yoda taking a personal Padawan? It hasn't happened in centuries. And to skip the youngling phase entirely? It's unheard of. But this isn't a normal case. Anakin is 9, far too old to start from scratch, and Yoda knows there's no time to waste. For the next 10 years, the boy becomes Yoda's shadow. They don't train in groups. They don't follow the usual curriculum. Every day, it's just the two of them, alone in the Force. Yoda teaches him to breathe before he speaks, to feel the room before he moves, to listen, not just to words, but to the silence beneath them. He knows Anakin's greatest weakness isn't power, it's fear. Fear of loss, fear of not being enough, fear of being alone. So Yoda focuses on grounding him, not just in combat or technique, but in identity. He teaches him meditation, patience, balance. They spar with training sabers. They study ancient texts. Yoda makes Anakin build and rebuild his lightsaber again and again, not to perfect the weapon, but to understand the process, the discipline. At first, Anakin hates it. He wants action. He wants to move, to fight, to be seen. But Yoda doesn't give in. He waits. And slowly, the boy begins to change. The other Padawans whisper about him. He doesn't train with them. He doesn't laugh or struggle like they do. He's different. Some are jealous, some are scared, but Anakin doesn't care. He's focused, and he's growing. Yoda sees it too. The boy's connection to the Force is stronger than anyone's. He picks up techniques in weeks that take others years. He even learns a rare Jedi ability, Force Judgment, a controlled, non-lethal form of energy projection, similar to Sith lightning, but born of clarity, not rage. Few Jedi have ever mastered it, but Anakin can. By the time the Clone Wars begin, Anakin is no longer a boy. He's a weapon tempered by wisdom. And Yoda, he's proud, but cautious. He knows the galaxy is changing. When war breaks out and the Jedi become generals, Yoda sends Anakin to the front lines, but not alone. He pairs him with Obi-Wan, not as a master and apprentice, but as equals, brothers in arms, and they win, again and again. But behind every victory, darkness looms. Chancellor Palpatine watches Anakin closely. He still sees him as the key to everything. But this time, the boy isn't chasing approval. He isn't looking for a father. He already has one. Yoda may be strict, but he's constant. And that changes everything. When Anakin loses men in battle, he doesn't snap. He grieves, yes, but he doesn't rage. He meditates. He reaches out. He trusts the Force. When he dreams of his mother suffering, he doesn't race to Tatooine alone. He confides in Yoda, who listens without judgment. And when they find Shmi, it's together. Too late to save her, but not too late to save Anakin from himself. He still cries. He still breaks. But he doesn't slaughter the village. He buries his mother. And then he kneels before Yoda and says, "Teach me to let go." And Yoda does. Back on Coruscant, the war escalates. The Jedi Council starts to lose faith in the Senate. Palpatine grows bolder, and Anakin, he becomes a knight. Not because he demanded it, not because of politics, but because he earned it. Still, the Council hesitates to trust him fully. Old habits die hard, but Yoda pushes back. He tells them the boy has grown. He tells them the prophecy isn't about power, it's about choice. And Anakin, he says, has learned to choose the light. But the Sith haven't given up. Dooku still leads the Separatists. Grievous still wreaks havoc. And Sidious still lurks in the shadows. Which brings us to Utapau. In our timeline, Obi-Wan went alone to confront General Grievous. But in this one, Anakin volunteers. And this time, Yoda agrees. He tells the Council that Anakin is ready, that his training was meant for this, that this is the moment he was born for, and no one argues. Anakin travels to Utapau with clone reinforcements. He lands quietly. He finds Grievous fast, no stalling, no theatrics, just purpose. General Grievous, he says. The cyborg spins his sabers, ready to mock, to strike, but Anakin doesn't blink. His Ataru form, fast, acrobatic, aggressive, is flawless. Every movement is precise. Every strike is measured. He overwhelms Grievous not with anger, but with mastery. The fight doesn't last long. Grievous falls. The Separatists scatter, and Anakin, calm, centered, alive, returns to Coruscant. But he's not alone. So does the Shadow. Because Palpatine knows his time is running out. The war is ending. The Jedi are closing in, and his greatest weapon has slipped from his fingers. So he makes one last move. He invites Anakin to his office, offers him truths, temptations, power. He reveals himself as Darth Sidious and waits, but Anakin doesn't flinch. He listens, he breathes, and then he says, "You're under arrest." No panic, no rage, just resolution. And then, just like that, he walks away, straight to Yoda. And the moment Yoda hears those words, he's the Sith Lord, the world seems to stop. He closes his eyes, nods, and says, "Then end it, we must, together." Palpatine didn't expect this. He'd spent years weaving his web, whispers in the Senate, shadows over the Council, secrets slipped to a boy who once needed a father. But that boy no longer existed. The young man standing before Yoda now was steady, unshaken, and clear. They moved quickly. Yoda didn't call a full meeting of the Council. There wasn't time. Instead, he summoned only those he trusted with absolute certainty. Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Kit Fisto, Agen Kolar, Saisi Tiin, Jedi Masters who had seen war, who knew loss, and who wouldn't hesitate in the face of a Sith Lord. Anakin stood beside them, not as a subordinate, but as an equal. Palpatine was waiting when they arrived. The sun was setting over Coruscant, casting long shadows through the Chancellor's high office windows. He stood near his desk, hands clasped, gaze unreadable. Yoda stepped forward. He didn't ask. He simply said, "Reveal yourself, you will." And Palpatine did. He let the illusion fall. The warmth drained from his face. His voice dropped. He reached beneath his robes and ignited a lightsaber, crimson, bursting to life. It didn't matter that he was outnumbered. He'd spent years preparing for this moment, and he didn't plan to die quietly. The Jedi lit their sabers. The room exploded. It wasn't a fight, it was a storm. Palpatine moved like lightning, cutting through the air with rage and precision. Kalar fell first, too slow to dodge. Tiin followed, caught mid-strike. Kit Fisto held longer, but even he couldn't withstand the flurry. In seconds, 3 were down. But this time, Anakin was ready. He and Obi-Wan flanked Windu, pressing forward in unison. Yoda moved with speed that defied his age, spinning and striking with the grace of centuries. Their blades formed a wall, blue, green, purple, closing in on the red. Palpatine snarled. He hurled the Force like a wave, blasting Windu against the wall. He tried to separate them, to isolate, divide, destroy, but they stayed connected. Anakin ducked beneath a sweeping arc and disarmed Palpatine with a twist of the wrist, sending the Sith Lord's saber spinning across the floor. He fell back, cornered. But even now, he wasn't done. He reached out with the Force, not to fight, but to tempt. "You don't understand," he hissed. "They fear your power. They've always feared you." Anakin stepped forward, saber raised. "You lied to me." Palpatine's eyes narrowed. "They would have held you back. I would have given you everything." The blade came down, but it stopped midair. An invisible grip held Anakin's arm in place. Not the Sith's, not the Force. Yoda. Justice, not vengeance, the Grand Master said, his voice calm. "The Jedi way, this is." Anakin's breath shook. He looked down at the trembling saber in his hands, and slowly, he lowered it. Palpatine screamed. Troopers burst into the room, not to fight, to arrest. The Chancellor of the Republic was taken away in bindings, spitting curses through broken teeth. The Jedi watched in silence, and somewhere far away, the Force exhaled. With Sidious exposed and the war nearing its end, the Senate erupted. Emergency powers were revoked. A new Supreme Chancellor was voted in, one with no Sith allegiance, no secret army. The clones were decommissioned and replaced with a volunteer peacekeeping force. And most importantly, there was no Order 66, no betrayal, no purge, no temple massacre. The Jedi lived. But so did the scars. For years, the Order had danced on the edge of war, entangled in politics, distracted from the very thing they were sworn to protect, the Force. Yoda saw this, and after the battle with Sidious, he made a decision. He stepped down, not in shame, but in clarity. The war had cost them too much. The Jedi needed healing, renewal, and he knew exactly who should lead them into that future. Anakin Skywalker. At first, the council was hesitant. He was young, barely past 30, and still growing. But he had proven himself, not just in battle, but in restraint, in wisdom. He had walked to the edge of the dark and turned back, so they agreed. Anakin became the youngest Jedi Master in the Order's history, not for what he could do with a saber, but for the future he could build. He didn't do it alone. Obi-Wan remained by his side, a voice of experience and friendship. Mace Windu stayed on as High Counselor, guiding policy and diplomacy. And Yoda, though no longer in power, remained as a teacher and elder, a quiet presence in the background. Together, they restructured the Order. They ended the practice of taking children from their families too young. They focused more on emotional intelligence, meditation, and mental balance. They opened the temple to citizens of the Republic, not to wield sabers, but to learn the Force in smaller, gentler ways. And amid this rebirth, a family began to grow. Padme Amidala never died. There was no chokehold, no confrontation on Mustafar, no funeral procession, because Anakin never fell. When the war ended, Padme stepped down from the Senate and moved quietly into the Jedi Temple. It was unorthodox, but the Council, now more open, understood. She and Anakin had loved each other for years. Hiding it hadn't changed the bond. Embracing it with honesty allowed them both to flourish. And then came the twins, Luke and Leia. They were born not in shadow, but in peace. Raised among Jedi, but not hidden. They grew up knowing both politics and philosophy, learning from their mother's courage and their father's calm. When they were old enough, they began their own training. Not forced, not shaped, just guided. They were strong. By the time they were young adults, the galaxy had entered an era of calm it hadn't known in generations. No Death Star, no rebellion, no empire, just balance. The Sith crippled. With Sidious gone and Dooku slain in battle years earlier, there were few who dared claim that title again. And those who did never lasted long. The Jedi, now wiser, hunted darkness not with rage, but with clarity. And yet, even in peace, Anakin never stopped watching the horizon. He knew the Force would always move. That balance wasn't a destination, it was a choice made every day. When Yoda passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 924, the entire Order mourned. Anakin stood in the Hall of Remembrance, silent, his old master's cane resting in his hands. He didn't cry, he smiled. Because Yoda hadn't just trained him to fight, he trained him to live. And in doing so, he saved the galaxy. Years passed, but without war. The Clone Wars were over, the Republic was healing, and under Anakin Skywalker's leadership, so were the Jedi. He didn't rebuild the old order, he reimagined it. Gone were the rigid hierarchies that separated knights from the galaxy they swore to protect. Gone was the cold detachment from relationships, from compassion, from life. Anakin had walked that path, and he knew where it led. Instead, he taught balance, real balance. Not as the absence of emotion, but as the ability to feel deeply without losing yourself. And the temple changed. Its halls, once solemn and quiet, were filled with new voices, children laughing, families visiting, diplomats seeking counsel, not commands. The Jedi were no longer warriors or mystics. They were guardians again, listeners, teachers, keepers of peace, not enforcers of it. And yet, even in this new age, not all threats vanished. Across the stars, pockets of darkness remained. Not organized Sith, those days were over, but echoes. Scars in the Force, fragments of teachings left behind by Dooku, Maul, and others who had flirted with the dark and left it to fester. Cults rose. Rogue Force users experimented with old rituals, and in the Outer Rim, something ancient began to stir. Anakin felt it first. It came in visions, flashes of cold worlds, faceless beings, whispers in languages he didn't understand. He didn't hide it. He gathered his council, now led by Mace Windu and Ahsoka Tano, and they traced the energy across forgotten systems. Ahsoka had returned to the Order not long after the war. She'd seen what the council once was and what it had become. Anakin had welcomed her back without question. To him, she was always family. Together, they found the source. It wasn't Sith, not exactly. It was something older, raw, primal. A remnant of the Force untouched by Jedi or Sith teachings. A being known in whispers as the Null, not alive in the traditional sense, but conscious, feeding off imbalance. It didn't want control. It wanted silence, destruction. It had waited centuries for the galaxy to weaken itself with war. But now, with the Jedi strong and whole again, it began to push. Planets fell into chaos. Storms swept through hyperspace lanes. Force-sensitive children went missing. Something was awakening, and it had no face, just hunger. Anakin didn't panic. He returned to where it all began, Mortis, the ancient world of the Force itself. He remembered the stories, the father, the daughter, the son. He remembered what it meant to hold balance between light and dark, between control and chaos. If the Null was the wound, Mortis might be the cure. He brought only 3 with him: Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and Luke. Leia stayed behind, leading efforts on Coruscant. She had grown into a powerful diplomat, strong with the Force but drawn more to building alliances than wielding sabers. Luke, on the other hand, had followed in his father's footsteps, calm, disciplined, but full of questions. They arrived at Mortis in silence. The world hadn't changed. It was still suspended in its own strange place, both ancient and outside of time. But something was missing. The balance was gone. The structures were crumbling, the life fading. It was as if Mortis itself was reacting to the galaxy's shift, and in the center of it all was the Null. It didn't speak. It moved like fog, a presence that filled the air, the ground, the space between atoms. It didn't lash out. It consumed. Anakin could feel it, pulling on his mind, whispering doubts, resurfacing memories that were never real. Visions of Padme dead, of burning temples, of a child named Vader. But he wasn't afraid. He stepped forward and closed his eyes. He didn't fight it. He listened, and he understood. The Null wasn't a villain. It wasn't evil. It was a reaction to imbalance, to decades of Jedi and Sith pulling the Force in opposite directions, each demanding purity from something that was never meant to be pure. Light and dark weren't enemies, they were siblings. The Force didn't want perfection, it wanted peace, so Anakin gave it. He opened himself completely to the Force, not just the parts the Jedi taught, but everything. The light, the shadow, the fear, the hope. He didn't try to silence the dark. He embraced it, accepted it. And through that acceptance, he brought balance. The Null stopped, the visions faded, and for the first time in generations, Mortis was calm. They returned home changed. Anakin didn't speak of what happened there. Neither did Luke. But something shifted in the temple after that. A deeper sense of presence, a calm that couldn't be shaken. The galaxy didn't know how close it had come to falling again, but the Jedi did. Years turned into decades. Leia led the Republic into a golden age of diplomacy and cooperation. The Senate worked, not perfectly, but earnestly. With the Jedi no longer tied to government power, they became impartial advisors, mediators, and defenders. Conflicts were rare. Empires never rose again. Luke eventually took his father's place on the council, and when Anakin stepped down, he passed the title of Grand Master to his son. The Skywalker legacy wasn't power, it was perspective. Even Rey, an orphan girl raised on the desert world of Jakku, would one day come to the temple, drawn by dreams she couldn't explain. She would be welcomed, not feared, trained gently, not broken. And in her, the Force would write a new chapter. Anakin Skywalker died at the age of 87, not in battle, not on a medical table, but peacefully, surrounded by friends, family, and students. He didn't vanish like the legends. He didn't become mist or myth. He just smiled, closed his eyes, and became one with the Force. His funeral was quiet, not because he wasn't loved, but because he'd already said everything he needed to. The galaxy didn't weep for a fallen hero. It celebrated the man who had brought balance not with rage, but with clarity. And Yoda's legacy? It lived on in every corner of the Order. Every child trained to ask why, not just how. Every mission where a Jedi listened first instead of fighting. Every moment, a knight chose compassion over fear, because Yoda hadn't just saved Anakin by training him. He saved everyone Anakin would go on to protect, all because he made one choice. He said, "No, Obi-Wan. The boy is not ready for you, but I am." And the galaxy was never the same again. Yoda's wisdom echoed not in temples or scrolls, but in Anakin's choices. In every battle he avoided, every student he guided, every life he saved. The Jedi Order didn't fall, it evolved. In a galaxy where one master stepped forward, where destiny bent not to fear, but to patience. Balance wasn't lost, it was learned. If you like this alternate timeline, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more Star Wars stories, and as always, may the Force be with you.